Another race heating up is the Florida Senate race, which grew tense as candidates spoke about election security and accepting results.
I think in Florida, we have great election laws, but I think elections have to have rules. And Congresswoman Deming supported this effort to have a federal takeover of elections.
We have to do everything within our power to uphold the Constitution, protect the rule of law, and protect our democracy.
This comes after new body cam footage showed police arresting voters in Florida. Now, a handful of convicted felons were charged with voter fraud in August. They say they had permission to register to vote, even though they were not eligible under state law. Critics say Florida's governor is trying to intimidate potential voters and create confusion over who is allowed to go to the polls in just 20 days. Ed O'Keefe is in Washington with more on this. Ed, good morning. Boy, I mean, that body cam video tells the tale.
Sure does, Anne-Marie. Good morning. The arrests were made following investigations by a new Florida State Police force established by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis to investigate voter fraud. According to local reports, most of those arrested were black and registered Democrats.
Some voter fraud, voter stuff.
In footage obtained by CBS News on August 18th, police showed up at the Tampa home of Tony Patterson, a registered sex offender who was told he was under arrest for voter fraud.
Voter fraud? What is voter fraud?
Voting when you're not supposed to, sir.
Put your hands on your back, please.
That same day, Ramona Oliver, who served 18 years on a second-degree murder charge, was arrested for voting illegally in 2020, even though she'd received a voter ID card from the state.
I'm like, voter fraud? I voted, but I ain't commit no fraud.
Patterson, Oliver, and 18 others were accused of violating a 2018 state law that allows most former felons to vote after they complete their sentences. But that law excludes convicts like Patterson and Oliver who were convicted of a felony sex offense or murder. Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis touted the arrests that same day.
They are disqualified from voting because they've been convicted of either murder or sexual assault.
More than 11 million votes were cast in Florida in the 2020 election when some of those arrested allegedly illegally voted. In the videos, first obtained by the Tampa Bay Times, Patterson tells a police officer he was misled.
Voter fraud.
Let's walk over to my car,
Why is y'all doing this now and this happened years ago?
I don't know.
Voting rights advocates say it's a game of gotcha.
When people get a voter ID card from their government, what else are they going to presume except that they're eligible to vote?
Good evening.
In a debate Tuesday night between Florida's U.S. Senate candidates, these specific arrests didn't come up, but the candidates did spar over voting rights.
Florida has very good election laws, and the states that don't have very good election laws are the states that actually have gone in the opposite direction of weakening security for the ballot.
Florida has an election law police force, and if the laws are so wonderful, what's the need for that?
Republican Senator Marco Rubio and Democrat Val Demings, who you saw there, are locked in a close and expensive fight. Aides to Governor DeSantis, who's running for re-election this year against Democrat Charlie Crist, didn't return requests for comment on the concerns that some of these former felons may have been misled or confused by state law. Anne-Marie?
You know, clearly I sort of misunderstood when Governor DeSantis announced that he was creating this kind of new unit to look into voter fraud. I thought that part of that was also about educating people about voter fraud, educating them about whether or not they can vote or they can't, unifying the information, when it comes to all the relevant departments. But obviously not. What is this police force actually tasked to do?
No, that definitely wasn't part of the plan when it was passed earlier this year by the GOP-controlled state legislature. It's a few dozen investigators across the state who are tasked with essentially fielding these accusations of voter fraud and looking into them and then, taking them to prosecutors if necessary. And this is, this law specifically here, the 2018 law that you see here in this full-screen graphic, is one that was already on the books and was approved by state voters the same year that he was elected governor. And remember, added more than 1 million former felons potentially to the voter rolls in Florida, with the exception of those convicted of sex crimes or murder, which is who these people were that were arrested in the Tampa area. There are others across the state who have been or will be probably arrested in the coming weeks on charges of fraudulently voting, whether they violated that 2018 law, whether they misidentified themselves. They may be accused of other things, but this specific special election police force, as some have called it, was deemed necessary by Republican legislators, deemed unnecessary certainly by critics who say it's going to confuse voters, it's going to intimidate voters, it's going to make it more confusing for some people to know when and how to vote.
You know, the people in the video, some of them, you know, were told that they were told it was okay to vote. They figured they got ID, so that it must be okay. Do they have any legal recourse? Because, I mean, 5 years is a long time.
Well, you and I are not lawyers, so we're not necessarily the best folks to ask for this. But the people we spoke to about this yesterday pointed out that this essentially is an unfunded mandate. All right, a law was passed, you know, making it illegal to do this, but that requires the state to weed out who isn't eligible and to flag that in the various computer systems across the state in the event that somebody were to go looking for a voter registration form. In one of these cases, the guy said he went to the DMV, and the guy handed us, whoever it was, said, you can register to vote. And if you look at the Florida voter registration form, top left corner, it says, convicted felons are not allowed to vote. And that's about all it says. It doesn't say you can vote once your sentence is over, you've served your time, or you can as long as you didn't, you know, get convicted of murdering somebody or of a sex crime. And so that's the argument that these advocates are making is, look, if you're somebody who just came out of jail after several years and you're told, yeah, you can vote, and nothing in the state databases flags you, is it your fault?
Right.
That'll be an argument that a judge is going to have to settle in Florida in the coming months.
Listen, before we let you go, I suppose I should ask you about the debate. You know, in general, give me your overview. What stood out?
Look, the one and only face-to-face encounter between Senator Rubio and his well-funded challenger, Congresswoman Demings. They sparred over immigration, which, of course, has become a hot-button issue in Florida, given what Governor DeSantis did, shipping out dozens of migrants to other states. They talked about election laws, given that that's also been a controversial issue in the state over the last year. You know, this is an expensive race that's already exceeded $100 million in spending because you got at least 7 media markets in the state. It was at one time seen as a more competitive potential flip for Democrats. It hasn't received as much attention or outside spending as some of the other races in places like Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. And polls continue to show them close, but just about every statewide election in Florida is close. And Republicans have a built-in advantage in voter registration and, frankly, in electing statewide candidates in recent years.
Looks like Florida's going to turn out to be another one of those really interesting races again. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much.
Take care.